The betrayal arrived at 10:17 p.m. I was in my library, surrounded by the comfortable quiet of my books, reviewing old battle maps for a lecture I was idly preparing. A notification flashed on my screen. A bank alert. A payment. $15,000. The recipient, Willow Creek Estates. I didn't recognize the name. I didn't feel panic. I felt a click. The cold, precise sound of tumblers falling into place in a very complex lock. I searched my email inbox for Willow Creek. Nothing. Then I checked my deleted items folder. And there it was. A message from my son Stephen to a doctor whose name I had never heard. I opened it. The words were few, but they were in military terms, the final operational order for an ambush. Thank you, doctor. The diagnosis of early-onset Parkinson's with cognitive decline is exactly what we need. This will activate the medical power of attorney. My father won't be in any position to object. I didn't cry. I didn't call Stephen and scream. As a historian of military strategy, I know you never ever reveal your position to the enemy before your own defenses are set. My anger wasn't hot. It was clinical. It was the cold clarity of a general seeing the entire battlefield laid out before him. I looked at a photo of my late wife Michelle on the desk. "Well, Chell," I whispered, "our boy just declared war." Instead of panicking, I picked up my phone. I didn't call my lawyer. I didn't call my granddaughter. I made one call to the only number I knew by heart that wasn't family. The phone rang twice. A gruff voice answered. "Yeah, Robert," I said, my voice perfectly level. "It's Owen." A pause. Then, "Owen, are you sure?" Robert and I served together decades ago. He was my most trusted man then, and he was my most trusted man now. It was no accident that for the last 5 years he had been the head of resident care at a very specific, very expensive facility called Willow Creek Estates. "I'm looking at the email now," I said. "The doctor's report is filed. They paid the first installment. They'll be here in the morning to play the part of the concerned family." Robert let out a long, slow breath. "So the Fortress Protocol is a go." "The Fortress Protocol is a go," I confirmed. "I'm going in." "I'll have your room ready, General," Robert said. He always called me that, a nickname from our old days. "The one in the Magnolia Wing, just as we discussed. Secure line, private network access, all of it." "I'll see you in the morning, old friend," I said, and hung up. I closed the laptop. My son Stephen believed he was committing a perfect act of betrayal. He thought he was locking his demented old father away to rot while he siphoned off $2.5 million and a company he'd already run into the ground. What Stephen didn't know is that you never ever try to out-strategize a historian who has studied every failed campaign from Cannae to Stalingrad. He wasn't imprisoning me. I was infiltrating his operation. I went to my bedroom, packed a small bag, and sat in my library to wait for the sunrise. I wasn't waiting for my capture. I was waiting for the first move in my counter-offensive. As I sat there in the deep velvet quiet of my own library, the moon cast long inquisitorial shadows over the rows of books. I was waiting. An old soldier knows this feeling well. It is the silence before the battle, the moment where the air is so thick with inevitability you can taste it like iron. My son was coming to imprison me, and I was letting him. To understand what Stephen was doing, you have to understand the man he had become. And to understand that, you have to understand the man I had been. A father. A fool. This wasn't just about my $2.5 million estate. That was the prize, yes. The spoils of war. But the motive, the true casus belli, was something far more personal. It was my legacy. I built Scott Historical Consulting from nothing. I turned a lifetime of studying military failures and victories into one of the most respected and profitable consulting firms in the country. We didn't just advise on movie scripts or government projects. We taught corporations how to think like generals, how to see the terrain of the market, how to anticipate an opponent's move. It was my life's work, a fortress of logic, strategy, and hard-won reputation. 5 years ago, I proudly handed the keys to that fortress to my only son. And Stephen, my brilliant, charming, catastrophically weak son, ran it directly into the ground. I watched silently at first, as he made one disastrous decision after another. I had built the firm on the bedrock of unglamorous long-term contracts. Stephen, desperate to prove he was smarter than his old-fashioned father, chased trends. He poured money into metaverse strategic consulting. He tried to launch a division for NFT-based historical assets. He was a terrible strategist, always fighting the last war, always seduced by the new flashy weapon, never understanding the simple, brutal arithmetic of supply lines and reserves. The debts piled up. The reputation I had built over 30 years began to tarnish. And when the walls started to crack, he came to me. Not with a request for advice, but with a demand for a rescue. I remembered the first time a decade ago. A bad investment in some ridiculous tech startup. He had been so convincing, so full of fire. "It's the future, Dad," he'd pitched, using all the buzzwords he'd learned. 6 months later, it was a quiet, shame-faced phone call. "I just need a bridge loan, Dad, $50,000 just to tide me over." I wrote the check. I called it an investment in his education. The second time was worse. A call at 3 a.m. Not a business failure, but a personal one. A DUI, a potential scandal. I did what powerful fathers do. I made calls. I hired the best lawyer. I made it go away to protect the family name. The family name had become a shield I held while he hid behind it throwing rocks. The bailouts stacked up. $100,000 to cover a market downturn. Another $50,000 to restructure. Then $200,000 to make payroll he couldn't meet. $400,000 of my personal retirement fund gone. Vaporized to protect him from the one thing that could have saved him failure. And as I sat there waiting for the sun to rise, the cold, hard, inescapable truth finally settled on me. I am a professor of strategy. I have taught at West Point. I can tell you in granular detail exactly why Napoleon lost at Waterloo. He delayed his attack due to muddy ground, allowing Blucher's Prussians to arrive precisely when Wellington needed them. I can explain how the entire German Sixth Army was encircled and destroyed at Stalingrad, a failure of logistics, yes, but more a failure of imagination and an excess of hubris. I had studied the blunders of emperors and generals my entire life, and I had committed the single greatest strategic blunder of all fatherhood. My love for Stephen, I finally understood, had been a form of fatal miscalculation. It wasn't love, it was enabling. It was a policy of appeasement. I thought I was being kind, being supportive. But in reality, I was Neville Chamberlain, waving a piece of paper promising peace for our time, while the aggressor in my own home was rearming. I had been his rescuer for so long that I had taught him, drilled into him like a catechism, the single most dangerous lesson a man can learn, that actions have no consequences. Every check I wrote was a lesson. Every debt I covered was a reassurance that someone else would always pay for his mistakes, that the bill would never ever come due for him. I hadn't raised a son. I had raised a dependent. I had raised an emperor who believed in his own divine right, who saw me not as a father, but as a treasury to be plundered, a line of credit that never closed. This is what psychologists call the enabling wound, a wound I had inflicted on him year after year with my good intentions, and now that wound had turned septic. That email, the fake Parkinson's, the fraudulent doctor. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was accounting. This was the bill for a lifetime of my own educational failures coming due. Stephen wasn't trying to lock me away because I was sick. He was trying to lock me away because he was finally definitively out of money. The company was collapsing, the creditors were circling, and he needed to liquidate his last largest and most stubborn asset, me. A cold calm washed over me. The hurt was gone. The sentimental love of a father was gone. All that remained was the historian. The strategist, the general who had been for a moment surprised by an enemy attack, but who was now seeing the entire battlefield with perfect, terrible clarity. "All right, Stephen," I whispered to the empty room as the first gray clinical light of dawn touched the window. "You've made your move. You've committed your forces." I stood up and straightened my tie. "Let's see how you handle the counteroffensive." At 9 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it, and the performance began. There was Stephen, his face a mask of practiced, agonizing concern. Beside him stood his wife Amanda, clutching his arm, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. And between them, a man I didn't know, holding a leather briefcase, who must have been the doctor who sold his signature and his soul. "Dad," Stephen said, his voice trembling just enough. "My God, we've been so worried. You missed your appointment this morning. The one with Dr. Evans." I looked at the stranger. "Dr. Evans, I presume." The man nodded, offering a weak, professional smile. "Mr. Scott, I'm just here to check on you. Stephen and Amanda have expressed some profound concerns about your recent cognitive state." Amanda pushed forward, her voice dripping with the kind of fake sympathy that curdles in the air. "Owen, we're terrified. The confusion, the memory lapses. This is a good thing. This is to help you." I let the silence hang for a moment. I studied their faces. The anxiety in Stephen's eyes was real, but it wasn't the anxiety of a loving son. It was the anxiety of a gambler who has pushed all his chips into the center of the table and is desperate for the last card to fall. "I saw the email, Stephen," I said. The words were quiet, but they landed like a grenade. The fake concern didn't just fade, it evaporated. It vanished. Amanda's face hardened, her perfectly manicured hand dropping from Stephen's arm. The doctor, Evans, took an involuntary step back, his professional mask flickering. Stephen's mask didn't just flicker, it shattered. The worried son disappeared, and in his place was the man I had finally recognized last night. The cold, angry, entitled man I had built. "So?" Stephen said, his voice flat, all pretense of warmth gone. "You saw it. Good. That makes this easier." "Easier?" I asked. "Yes," he snapped. "We were trying to do this the nice way, the supportive way. But if you're going to be combative, then we'll do it the hard way. You are sick, Dad. The doctor has confirmed it." Has he?" I said, looking at the doctor, who was now staring intently at his shoes. "Confirmed a progressive cognitive decline. Based on what exactly? A 5-minute conversation he's never had with me, or the wire transfer that hit his account 48 hours ago?" The doctor went pale. Stephen stepped forward, his face inches from mine. "It doesn't matter. The power of attorney is active. It's done. You are a danger to yourself. You're mismanaging the company, you're forgetting things. You're not the man you were." "And you are," Amanda chimed in, her voice now sharp and full of venom. "We can't let you destroy the company, Owen. Destroy our legacy." She glanced around my library, her eyes filled with disdain. "This dusty old house, the new place, the one at Willow Creek, it's beautiful, it's safe, it's where you belong." This was the escalation. The moment they dropped all pretense. They weren't just shocked I'd found out. They were annoyed. Annoyed that I was making this difficult, that I was complicating the clean, simple theft of my life. They believed they held all the cards. They had the fraudulent diagnosis. They had the power of attorney. They had the $15,000 deposit receipt. To them, the battle was over. And so, as any good general does when his enemy is overconfident and has fallen perfectly into his trap, I did the last thing they expected. I surrendered. I raised my hand slowly. "All right," I said, my voice infused with a sudden weary tremor. "All right. If you really think this is what's best, if you're all so worried." Stephen's shoulders visibly relaxed. The relief on his face was disgusting. He had won. He had actually won. "It is Dad," he said, trying to reclaim his concerned tone but failing. "It's for your own good. We'll get your bag." "No need," I said, picking up the small overnight bag I had packed hours before. "I'm ready." I walked out of my own home, my library, my life. Stephen on one side, the fraudulent doctor on the other. Amanda trailed behind already on her phone, no doubt scheduling a consultation with a realtor. They drove me to Willow Creek Estates. It was exactly as I'd anticipated, expensive, serene-looking, more like a country club than a prison. It was designed to look beautiful to soothe the guilt of the wealthy children who dumped their parents there. We walked into the Magnolia Wing for memory care. It was quiet, smelled of lavender and disinfectant, and the doors had keycard locks. Stephen and Amanda said their goodbyes. They were quick. No tears, just tight, false smiles. "We'll be back in a few days to check on you, Dad." "Get settled," Stephen said. "We love you," Amanda added without making eye contact. And then they were gone. They left me in the hallway a new resident, a 73-year-old man with early-onset Parkinson's and cognitive decline. They left me there to rot. I stood there for exactly 30 seconds. Then a side door opened. A nurse I'd never seen stepped out. "Mr. Scott," she asked, her voice neutral. "Yes." "Robert is waiting for you. Come with me." I followed her not to a patient room, but to a service elevator down a short hall and to a door marked private. She swiped a card and opened it. It wasn't a room, it was an office. And sitting behind the desk, a grim smile on his face, was Robert. "Welcome to the Fortress General," he said. "Your command center is secure." Robert locked the door behind us. The room was not a patient's cell. It was a small functional executive suite, complete with a desk, a heavy-duty laptop, and 2 phones, one for the internal network, one a dedicated secure line. The laptop is air-gapped from the facility's network. It's running on a private hotspot. "You're a ghost in this machine, Owen," Robert said. He placed a set of keycards on the desk. "This one gets you in and out of this office. This one is a master key for the Magnolia Wing, just in case. They think they've caged you. They have no idea you now have keys to the entire zoo." "You've done well, old friend," I said, sitting at the desk. The chair felt familiar, solid. "Just get the bastard," Robert said, his voice low. "I'll keep the staff clear of this office. You're logged in their system as under medical sedation and observation. You have at least 24 hours before they even think of checking on you in person." He left and the fortress was secure. I didn't waste a second. I picked up the secure line and dialed my lawyer, James. "James, it's Owen Scott." "Owen. My God, I've been trying to reach you. Your son called me this morning, said you'd had some kind of episode, that you were being moved to a care facility. I was about to file a wellness check." "Save your energy, James. It's a coup. Stephen has filed a fraudulent power of attorney based on a bribed doctor's report. I'm inside the facility now, but I'm secure." There was a stunned silence. James was a shark, but this was new. What, Owen? That's a felony." "Yes, it is," I said, my voice cold. "And we are going to treat it as such. I want you to file an emergency injunction, freeze my entire estate, all $2.5 million. Freeze every account associated with Scott Historical Consulting. I want Stephen cut off effective immediately. When he tries to access the funds to pay for this prison, I want his card declined. Consider it done." James said, the shock in his voice replaced by a sudden predatory hunger. "I'll need the documentation you mentioned." "It's coming, but I may have found something better." As I was speaking to James, the other secure phone, the one Robert had just set up, buzzed. A text message. It was from my granddaughter, Jessica, my daughter's girl, the only one in the family who had inherited my mind. The message read, "Grandpa, I did what you asked. It's worse than we thought. I have it. Call me on this number, now." "James," I said, "I have to go. You have your orders. Execute." I hung up and immediately dialed Jessica's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight and trembling. "Grandpa, are you okay, Dad and Mom? They left this morning. They looked so smug." "I'm fine, Jessica. I'm secure. Tell me what you found." I did what you taught me," she said, her voice cracking. "Jessica is a computer science student. Brilliant. I had always suspected Stephen's digital hygiene was as sloppy as his financial hygiene. You said if I was ever worried to look in his recycle bin. He's so arrogant, he didn't even wipe it. He just deleted the folder." I gripped the phone. "What was in the folder, Jessica?" "Grandpa, it's everything. He had a folder called estate planning and he just deleted it. I restored it. It has, oh God, Grandpa. Tell me, Jessica, read the file names." "There's a file named Owen Scott. Real will do not touch." I opened it. It's your will." The one you signed last year, leaving the company to me and the estate to the university's history department. My blood ran cold. And then there's another file. Owen Scott Revised Will Final. It's a forgery, Grandpa, a really good one. It looks just like your signature. This one leaves everything to Dad. The firm, the estate, all of it. My son, my own son. That's not all, she whispered, and I could hear her start to cry. There's a subfolder, medical. It has the whole email chain. With that Dr. Evans, it's all there. The first email is from Dad asking, how much for an evaluation with a predetermined outcome? The doctor replied with a wire transfer number, and Dad paid him. It's a receipt, Grandpa. He paid him $20,000 for that report. The digital smoking gun, the kill shot. Jessica finally broke. He's a criminal, she sobbed. That's my father, and he's just a common thief. I let her cry for a moment, my own heart a cold, hard knot in my chest. I heard her struggling to breathe to pull herself back together. This was the moment that would define her. I knew what I was asking her to do. This is the part of the story that people don't understand, the part that's harder than any legal battle. There's a terrible, painful moment when you have to choose between the family you're supposed to love and the truth you know is right. You have to decide if blood is an excuse for betrayal, if family is a shield for criminals. Jessica, my brilliant, brave granddaughter, was having to make a choice that no 20-year-old should ever have to make. To save me, she had to execute her own father. Jessica. I said, my voice gentle but firm. I know what this is, but you are a Scot, and we do not bow to corruption, not even from our own. I need you to do the hardest thing I will ever ask of you. I need you to send that entire folder to James, right now. There was a pause. I heard a click of a mouse, a shaky breath. It's done, she said, her voice suddenly clear, all the tears gone. The folder is sent. What happens now, Grandpa? I looked around my new command center. The trap was set. The enemy had advanced, and I was now holding the strategic high ground armed with an unassailable weapon. Now, Jessica, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. We begin the counterattack. 1 week. For 7 days, I remained a ghost. Robert would bring me meals from the staff canteen. James, my lawyer, finalized the injunctions and prepared the criminal complaints. Jessica, my granddaughter, compiled the digital evidence into a presentation so clear, so damning it was a work of art. Inside my command center, I was a general preparing for D-Day. Outside in the real world, my son Stephen was discovering the consequences of his new impoverished life. The first signal of his panic came via a report from James. Stephen had tried to access the corporate accounts to pay the next installment on my imprisonment. His access was denied. He tried to use the corporate card to take Amanda to a $200 lunch. Declined. He tried to draw from my personal estate using the fraudulent power of attorney. He was met with a wall of legal ice. He was trapped. A king who had staged a coup only to find the treasury empty and the army loyal to the man he'd deposed. The final move was to call an emergency meeting of the board of directors for Scott Historical Consulting. James sent the notice on my behalf, as was my right as majority shareholder. The agenda was listed as a discussion of executive leadership and a review of recent financial mismanagement. Stephen, I knew, would see this as his moment, his chance to use his fraudulent medical documents to prove I was incompetent and formally seize control. He would walk into that room believing he was the new emperor. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. The morning of the meeting, Robert handed me a freshly pressed suit. "Are you ready, General?" he asked. "It's time," I said. We didn't walk out the front door. We took the service elevator to the basement garage. James was waiting, the engine of his black sedan already running. No one saw me leave. I arrived at the company headquarters 30 minutes before the meeting. My company, my building, the board members, people I had known for 20 years, were already there. They looked confused, somber. They had been told I was gravely ill. They stood up as one when I walked in. I just nodded and said, "Gentlemen, please sit. We have a serious matter to discuss." I took my seat at the head of the table. James sat to my right. Robert, acting as my personal security and witness, stood by the door. At 10 a.m. on the dot, the conference room doors opened. Stephen and Amanda walked in. The look on their faces. It wasn't just shock. It was a complete systemic failure. It was the look of men who have charged a fortified hill only to realize at the very last second that all the cannons were pointed directly at them. Amanda's face went a chalky paper white. Her designer handbag slipped from her fingers, hitting the carpet with a dull, expensive thud. Stephen was worse. He made a small choking sound. He didn't see a father. He saw a ghost. He saw an impossibility. "Dad," he whispered. His eyes darted from me to James, to Robert, then back to me. How are you here? You're not well. You're at Willow Creek. You... Please take a seat, Stephen, James said, his voice cutting through the room like a razor. We have a lot to get through. Stephen and Amanda didn't sit. They staggered to the chairs opposite me, collapsing into them. What is this? Amanda demanded, trying to find her footing, her voice high and shrill. Stephen is the CEO. What is going on? That is, in fact, the first item on the agenda, James said, opening a folder. As of 9 a.m. this morning, an emergency injunction was granted freezing the entirety of Mr. Owen Scott's $2.5 million estate pending a criminal investigation. Furthermore, all signatory power held by Stephen Scott over the corporate accounts has been suspended. You can't do that, Stephen yelled, finding his voice. I have medical power of attorney. He's sick. He has Parkinson's. He has dementia. Tell them, Dad. Tell them how confused you've been. I just stared at him. I let his desperate, panicked words fill the silence. Then I nodded to James. Stephen, I said, my voice calm, every trace of fatherly warmth gone. You've accused me of cognitive decline. You've accused me of being a danger to this company. You are, he shrieked. Very well, I said. Then I suppose you'll have to explain this. I clicked a button on the remote in my hand. The large screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. The first image was the email, the one from Stephen to Dr. Evans. Subject evaluation. Body. How much for an evaluation with a predetermined outcome? The board members leaned forward. I heard one of them, a man named Harrison, gasp. That's illegal, Harrison murmured. Oh, we're just getting started, I said. I clicked again. The next slide, the wire transfer receipt for $20,000 from Stephen's personal account to the doctor's. That's a fabrication, Amanda screamed. You faked that. Faked it, I asked. Like this. Click. 2 documents appeared side by side. Owen Scott, real will, and Owen Scott, revised will, final. My real will, I narrated as if teaching a history lesson, leaves my estate to educational institutions and a trust for my granddaughter. This thing. I pointed to the forgery. Leaves everything, including the company, to Stephen. I clicked again. A high-resolution scan of the forged signature next to my real one. The differences were subtle, but to a professional, they were glaring. And finally, I said, the rest of the email chain, the digital smoking gun, as my granddaughter calls it. I let the entire conversation scroll across the screen. Stephen planning the bribery, the doctor agreeing, Stephen confirming the transfer, Stephen setting the date for my capture. The room was dead silent. The only sound was Amanda's short, panicked breathing. I turned to the board. Gentlemen, as you can see, I am not the one who has been mismanaging this firm. My son, in his desperation to cover $400,000 in operational debts he created, has committed fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. He has attempted to steal my legacy, and in doing so, he has permanently destroyed his own. I turned back to Stephen. He was broken. He was just a hollow shell staring at the screen, his face wet with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of defeat. Therefore, I said, as majority shareholder, I call for a vote. All in favor of the immediate termination of Stephen Scott as CEO for cause. Every hand in the room went up. The motion passes. I said, my voice like ice. "Stephen, you are fired!" That is what finally broke him. He lunged across the table. "No, no, Dad, please. Please. I can fix it. I was trying to protect the company from itself. Please. Dad, don't do this. Get him off me." Amanda shrieked, not at me, but at the board. "You can't let him do this. We have rights. We will sue every single one of you." "I'm afraid you won't," James said. He stood up and placed a thick bound document in front of Stephen and another in front of Amanda. What is this?" Stephen whispered. "That," I said, standing up, "is a copy of the criminal complaint filed with the district attorney's office, and that is a civil lawsuit for $250,000 in damages for the fraudulent spending and the attempted theft of my estate. Robert, if you would." Robert opened the conference room doors. 2 uniformed police officers were waiting in the hallway. Stephen looked at the documents. He looked at the police. He looked at me. His face, the face of my son, was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Goodbye, Stephen," I said, and I watched as they escorted him out of my building. The aftermath was not a celebration. It was an accounting. Stephen and Amanda were arrested right there in the lobby of my building. The criminal charges were overwhelming conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, elder abuse. The district attorney, seeing the digital evidence, proceeded with remarkable speed. The company was a wreck. Stephen had left it $400,000 in debt and its reputation in tatters. The board, in a panic, looked to me. I didn't want my old job back. I wanted to secure the future. I did the only logical thing. I appointed Jessica, my 20-year-old granddaughter, as the interim head of operations to act as my proxy. The board was stunned, but after she presented her plan to save the firm, a plan that was lean, intelligent, and ruthless, they agreed. She was, after all, a Scot. The right Scot. Stephen and Amanda lost everything. The civil suit seized what little they had left. Amanda filed for divorce before the first hearing, attempting to distance herself from the man she had so eagerly enabled, but the conspiracy charges tied her to him like an anchor. They were found guilty. Stephen received a sentence of 8 to 10 years. Amanda received 5. I returned to my library. It was exactly as I had left it. The battle was over. The fortress I had built inside Willow Creek was no longer necessary. I was home, but I felt empty. The victory was total, but it was hollow. I had executed a perfect strategy, but I had lost my son. I had confirmed my darkest suspicions. The clarity I felt was cold, and it did not keep me warm at night. A few weeks later, Jessica came to visit. She was thriving at the company, a natural leader. She came into the library holding a small cardboard box. "Grandpa," she said softly, "I found this. When we were cleaning out their house, Dad had thrown this in a donation bin. I thought you'd want it." She placed the box on my desk. I didn't recognize it. Inside, beneath some old photos, was a book, a simple leather-bound journal. I knew the handwriting instantly. It was Michelle's, my late wife. It was her journal, the one she had kept for the first 10 years of our marriage, the one I thought had been lost. Stephen must have taken it when she passed. I opened it, and I began to read. I didn't read about strategy. I didn't read about business. I read about us. I read about the day we met, the day we were married, the day Stephen was born. I read her words, her hopes, her dreams for our son. Her descriptions of him as a little boy, so bright, so full of laughter, but so sensitive. I read her worries. "I fear we push him too hard, Owen. I fear he just wants to be loved, and we are trying to make him be you." I read, and for the first time since this nightmare began, the cold, clinical, strategic ice in my chest broke. I was not the general. I was not the historian. I was just a man reading the words of his wife. I realized what I had been fighting for. Not just the money or the company. I was fighting for this. For her memory. For the legacy Stephen had tried to burn to the ground, the legacy he had so callously thrown in a donation bin. I held that journal to my chest. And for the first time, I cried. I cried for my wife. I cried for the little boy my son used to be. And I cried for the man I had become who had to use the logic of war to find peace in his own home. That night, for the first time in more than a year, I didn't dream of battle plans or balance sheets. I dreamed of a picnic long ago with Michelle laughing and a little boy running toward me, his arms wide open. I slept, and I was at last at peace. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.